Recording begins right now. Hi everyone, and welcome to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. I'm Rick Zanotti, and right next to me, a mere probably 2,000 miles away, is Dawn Mahoney. Hey Dawn, how are you?
Hi, I'm well, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great.
It's a rainy Wednesday in Wisconsin.
Well, not that they ever have weather in Wisconsin, right?
No, it's been raining for 24 hours here. So
I wish we had some rain. We actually have had some. Well, we have a little bit of rain, not much.
I was in San Antonio. There was national news coverage of the flooding. Who knows what we'll have here?
That's true. You don't want to know what you're going to have over there.
I don't really.
You might have minus 40 in summer.
It's chilly enough that I could actually have the heat on in my house today. I'm not happy.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's delaying my landscaping, but no one really cares about that.
Well, today we've got a second-time guest.
Yay.
And why it's taken so long, I have really no idea. But Clark...
that whole Internet Time Alliance thing.
It must be. Clark Quinn is on from Quinnovation.com. He, well-respected author, learning and development professional, and just a whole lot of other things. Clark, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be back.
Glad you're here.
Now, last time you were on was it's been over 2 years. So it's been almost 2.5 years, actually. It's been quite a while. What have you been up to in all that time? I know last time you had the book, I think, on which one was it? It was on I think, interactions gamification.
Yeah, it was that was engaging learning.
Engaging,
was
that's
about
it.
designing e-learning simulation games, trying to get people to put emotional engagement integrated effectively and create deep and meaningful practice. Since then, I've had really 2 more books related, though. The first one was Designing eLearning. It's about how do we think differently about learning and take advantage of these pocket technology solutions and start leveraging them to support increasing performance in the organization. And I probably nobody necessarily in the audience we have today, but The Mobile Academy is another book that's specifically mobile for higher ed. And it presumably goes to, sort of top levels of middle school and high school as well. The principles apply, but it's much more about formal learning and supporting formal learning as opposed to supporting the full range of performance that an organization would have.
And we actually have quite a few educators in the room many times.
Oh, okay.
So quite a few watch, so that could be very interesting.
Hang on a sec. I should have thought of this before, but just so we see that we have the
There we go.
actual, so you can have a visual aid to go along with the concept and the mention. So there, this program has been brought to you by
ClarksBooks.com.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So that's what I've been up to, and the continuing saga of speaking, writing, and consulting, the life of the independent.
Yep.
Chasing the money, as it were.
All that stuff that you keep doing to keep the roof over your heads, yes.
It's true. So, tell us about your latest endeavors. What's happening in Quinnovations, but also in the Internet Time Alliance? What's your new favorite thing?
Well, mobile is just really, caught on, and so my role in the Internet Time Alliance is Senior Director of Interaction and Mobile, and it's really, in some sense, we've selected our own title. So those who don't know, the Internet Time Alliance, I've joined up with my colleagues Jay Cross, Harold Yarkey, Jane Hart, and Charles Jennings in particularly in the space of helping organizations move beyond formal learning. Jay wrote the book Informal Learning and then was going out and talking to organizations about how they should tap into the power of the people, and he realized he was doing this alone and wait a minute, I'm not practicing what I preach. So he brought us together and to address that space. And Jane's focus with our e-learning tool today has been very much on social learning. Harold's talking about personal knowledge management, Charles' 70-20-10 model framework, and Jen, informal learning. Together, we've been working the space, and it's exciting. But mobile, to me, is one of these tools that is a door opener. Because you go in and you think, oh, well, we're going to do a mobile experiment. But it turns out mobile is a platform. And so it can do, it's like a desktop, except it's mobile, but it's a digital tool for delivering, interactive capabilities. And now you can take it anywhere. But its natural niche is not the course. Right. So when we come in with mobile, suddenly we're opening the door for the L&D organization to start thinking about performance support and social and even context-specific learning. And it can augment formal learning, but it really does make sense. A tablet maybe, and there's an interesting discussion about when does tablets make sense versus when does phones. But it's part of a channel. As I've been working with organizations and looking at what's happening in the field, I recognize that we need to change. We really do. And that change is to stop thinking just about courses as the only tool in our quiver, to mix my metaphors, and to start thinking about how do we go beyond. And I think we need to.
I think that it's a good note that the mobile is still just a platform, and LMS is a platform. It's a way to get information into, in quotes, the hands of the learners, but we're still building content and trying to build it usable, right?
Well, yes. I don't like to think about building content, though. Increasingly, I want to start talking about designing experiences. I want to design learning experiences, performance experiences, because with that focus on what are people doing and how are they doing, one of the things I complain is we sort of think about, oh, well, what needs to be in people's heads, instead of thinking about how are they going to be working to achieve their goals, both what's in their heads, but what's in the world, together, and then work backwards and say, well, then what do we put in the world to minimize the amount of stuff we have to put in the head? So that shift in focus is a direction I strongly think we need to shift in our thinking.
Clark, do you find that many people, when they're doing mobile development, are trying to recreate the desktop rather than look at it as a new and different environment?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, you see it too often in the expos, and everybody says, oh, well, we'll put your course on a phone. And it's just nuts. You talk to the people who know about, mobile, Chad Udell, Judy Brown, Jason Hagg. That's not mobile learning. That's what we call mobile e-learning. That's just your standard courses on a phone. That's really not the sweet spot for mobile at all, but yet people still tend to think about it, well, we're just going to use it to do the same stuff we've done, instead of saying, it's a horrible cliche now that new technologies are used the way old technologies were. So, the original TV shows were people standing up at microphones like they'd done on radio. Mm-hmm. And we're not seeing and taking advantage of this new platform in the ways that make sense. And yet individually, one of the things I try and tell people about mobile is, look at how you use your mobile device to make you smarter. You, Rick, how do you use your mobile devices to make you smarter? Already, today in your life.
I'm trying to think, to make me smarter. I don't know about making me smarter, but making me definitely much more efficient.
Yeah.
I have our contact management on my phone. I've got my email, my Twitter. I don't do that much, if you would call it mobile learning, partly because I'm usually at a computer anyway. So I don't have that, at least particular need. But I watch videos. I watch a lot of training videos. I watch product videos, things that if I want to know something, I can take my phone out real quickly and boom, I'm on YouTube. I can see a product demonstration, or I can learn something and go to lynda.com, whatever, and all of a sudden, I've got some training. So yeah, I guess I do use it for some training. And I notice, at least in my case, I don't want to let go of my phone. I like my phone or my tablet, whatever I've got with me. They're constantly there to help out in something or other. In my case, probably more research than anything else.
But see, that's exactly, you're thinking of formal learning, but you're using your phone in lots of interesting ways. I'll bet when you go out, to the store, you might quickly look up some information or even snap a picture of a product, or try and go out. If you have the right app, you can go out and scan the barcode and see who else around you has that.
Right, and I have done that.
You might quickly look for restaurants near you if you're in some unfamiliar place. Have you ever even used the camera to snap a picture of your parking space at the airport so you don't have to remember?
Actually, I have done that. I think we've all done that one, right?
When I don't do it, I'm mad at myself.
Well, exactly. These are all the powerful ways you're using these tools to make you more effective, just what you said, Rick. And yet we tend to suddenly go, oh, but that's not mobile learning. And so that's why I talk about big L learning. Really, it's about performance. We're trying to increase people's ability to be more effective. And if it's not a course, if it's a job aid, it's a reference tool, it's a context-sensitive connection or resource finder, that to me is the sweet spot of mobile. It is that, just what you said. You pull it out, you access it quickly, you put it away. It's not, videos occasionally, if you're trying to do something right now, I'm trying to repair my, bad example, we don't have carburetors anymore, but if I was trying to, adjust the jet on my carburetor, I might pull out a video and look at that. It's that sort of thing, but it's right in the moment, it's the need. If you look at how people use their phones, this comes from stuff Palm did many years ago when it was the Palm Pilot. People just whip it out, do something quickly, and put it away.
Yeah.
That's not a course.
So how are you designing for that? Tell us more about how you design for that and how you have the conversations with your clients about designing for mobile.
Thanks, Don. Absolutely. It's where are people finding barriers when they're not at their desks? That's really the starting question. What is it if they just had the right information? So when I tend to run a lot of mobile brainstorming sessions. So go in, give them some of these broader, have them prepare beforehand, think what thoughts they have. Then we come in, give them some new frameworks, and then lead a facilitating session that says, and with representative stakeholders going, where do you see barriers? What's not working? What key metrics would you like to improve in the organization? So in a recent medical case, it's trying to increase consistency. It's trying to decrease the amount of time patients have to come back again and again. This starts getting into, following procedures. The work Atul Gawande did with his checklists. These mobile devices are gorgeous for checklists and such little quick reference and support tools. So it's finding ways where just a little bit of information at the right time is going to help. That's the thing you're looking for. And again, similarly, where are things not working as well as you'd like? And if you could, tweak it, what metric are you trying to improve that let's, go back and look at what happens there and why it doesn't get the improvement we're trying to find, and try and find a point to fix it.
Are you running into resistance with leadership and so forth as far as they give them the device, but will they make this type of learning available? Is there security issues, all that kind of thing? How are you having those conversations?
Well, yes, not so much putting the, it's not so much asking them to help create solutions on the phone, but there's a lot of worries. Legal's worried about, particularly in the medical space, well, anything we put on there, it could be considered advice, so we have to make sure it's all vetted. Security's concern people have, and yet it's unjustified. There are solutions to most of the barriers you're worried about. Social media policies are pretty easy. We have security solutions, so effectively anything you'd allow on a laptop, you should be able to allow on mobile because they have the exact same security possibilities of virtual private networks. Even the lost phone, where somebody leaves it on a bus or something, they have now mobile device management software that lets you remotely wipe it. Right. So security is not the issue. I think people aren't aware of this, and their knee-jerk reaction indeed can be. Providing the device is one of the big issues. Do we provide it, or do we do BYOD, bring your own device? There are trade-offs. Increasingly, I think people are beginning to find that providing the device, in many contexts, providing the device increases the likelihood they'll be using it the way you want them to, and it decreases the ability to cover. If you don't provide the device and you do BYOD, you can only do stuff that can't be mandated because you can't guarantee that everybody's going to have or is going to buy the device you want them to have. And people resent you taking their personal stuff and putting work on it. Tom asked a question in the chat about BYOD is an issue if org needs to have the ability to wipe the device. Actually, that mobile device management software actually can allow you to just erase your app and not touch the rest of their material.
Right, I do that with my personal iPad. I have, I think we call it Iron Mountain or Iron something installed, and that reads our Outlook, but it is susceptible to the wiping should it need to be done because it's lost or stolen.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't lose the apps I've purchased and my data. I don't know how it works. I just know that's what's supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm. And with iOS, at least, the Apple devices, there's now Find My iPhone, Find My iPad. So if it's taken and they turn it on, it will send a signal. You'll be able to figure out where it is. They've actually caught people with the devices because they found it, and they've even on laptops at least, and I don't know on iPhones or not, they've taken pictures of the people who have it through the camera by turning it on remotely. So there's really interesting security options. But most of the barriers there are answers to. The barriers remain between the ears as opposed to out in the world.
So I just find it fascinating just to hear what your talking points are or how you ask the questions or respond to the questions, because we know all this, but I know I work for a large organization. There's a lot of resistance. So.
Well, I like the way you framed it, because when you asked me what do I use my device for as far as learning, and I wasn't thinking of learning per se, but you're right, it is a learning device. I was thinking of performance, but performance is tied to learning. So it's a different way of looking at it, but it makes sense.
I probably go to my personal phone and use Google on it 30 times a day. I on an average day, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but I'm always looking something up on my phone because it's faster for me than other things. Mm-hmm. And it's right where I need it to be.
Navigation I'm using all the time as well.
The maps. I can't travel without the maps on my Google phone anymore. I own a Garmin, but she and I fight, so.
Who wins?
I do. But that's how I use my mobile device. I don't have to carry both the Garmin and the phone anymore. I have most of what I need on one or my other of my phones and my iPad, although I still have to take my laptop most places. I haven't gotten to the point of being able to pull everything from Dropbox on my phone yet.
But I guess one of the keys is, as we are all as a society becoming attached to our phones, in almost every venture, learning pretty much becomes a byproduct of that. Whether they realize it or not, they're learning.
I will challenge that a little bit, Rick. I think the opportunity's there, but think about your GPS. Mm-hmm. It takes you where you need to go. It's the ultimate in performance support. It knows where you want to go, it knows where you are, and it can coach you every step of the way. But it doesn't teach you anything about the space you're at. It doesn't show you, about the political boundaries or the geology nearby or things, and yet it could with a very thin veneer. And that's, I think, one of the huge missed opportunities is to not only have performance support, but add a layer of the concept behind it that you can touch and it's made visible through the system, that could also turn it into a learning situation as well. And because, Gloria Geary always said when she was the guru of the instigator of the electronic performance support system, it was her vision that, it was really making up for bad interface design, but she always said not only will it help you in the moment, it'll teach you over time, but no, I've yet to see one that does that. And I think that's a really interesting opportunity that we should be looking at more concretely.
So is it the chicken or the egg syndrome? Is it because we're not designing properly for it? We don't think of it in those terms, or what? What's the real issue?
Well, I think the real issue is that connection that Rick was referring to, Don, the connection between performance support and learning. We still see them as separate things instead of sort of as a continuum. that they're related. And one of the things mobile gives us the opportunity to do is decouple learning from the classroom, from the desktop. And instead of doing this massed event, which we know doesn't work, we know that, bringing people together and dumping a bunch of information on them and sending back to the workplace, so much of that dissipates. But if we start doing little bits over time, that works. And we have the opportunity with these devices to do that. But we have to break out of the folk science of learning that we're still following, despite rampant evidence that it's not working, wasting money, wasting time, ineffective.
Now, Clark, one of the things that we all see in this industry is, and I think it's a problem with training on the whole, is that people seem to want to put together courses or training that throws the kitchen sink at you. Every modules that are 30 minutes long, an hour long. I've seen 5-hour e-learning modules in one big module, and you just go, okay, now who's really going to absorb much of this? And there is a trend, and I think mobile kind of forces this trend to go towards the learning nuggets, the smaller, more palpable, more easy to digest kind of learning versus the old kitchen sink approach.
I absolutely agree that what works for mobile is minimalism. Mm-hmm. Less is more. In fact, I have this mantra, the least assistance principle. What's the least I can do for you? And that's not rude. It's actually people don't want any more than we'll just get them back into action, back into what they do. And so mobile requires that in a sense, but it also turns out to be better principles for the rest of our learning as well. We overwrite, we overproduce, we put in what's nice to have instead of just what need to have. And John, you can start with John Carroll's minimalist instruction in his book, The Nuremberg Funnel, is a great way to go back and look at evidence of that beating the traditional instructional design by having just the minimum amount, taking advantage of the intelligence of your audience, what they know and their goals, and just using that to give them the least to get them where they need to go.
So where is training failing right now? Because I still see a ton of the old-fashioned approach. I mean, to the point of, I would say probably 50 or if not even 75% of that is pretty worthless if you think about it. It doesn't really serve much purpose. And the mindset is, okay, we're not in the classroom, so therefore we have to give them everything we do in the classroom via e-learning or whatever other method they use, and it becomes pretty much just as useless in many cases. When does that change? The schools are still not teaching a lot of minimalism issue.
And there are forces, mitigated against it. Don referred to this a little earlier, but I mean, there's vested interests in not changing. Mm-hmm. If I don't have a solution for this new area, I'm going to tell you that the old stuff is okay until I figured out how to adapt. This has been the bane of my existence. Learning and development has to change. Training, optimal execution, first of all, only affects about 10% of what people do according to the 70-20-10 model that Charles advocates. But also, we've got it designed wrong. It's knowledge dump, knowledge test. Knowledge isn't going to make any difference what people can do, by and large. We overemphasize that. We put in too much. We need to shift our thinking, and we need to start focusing on performance. And this has been my crusade now for quite a while, and yet I'm having a hard time changing it. The things we measure are wrong. How much does it cost per hour per bum and seat? Is, as Gloria Geary said, we may as well weigh them. Why are we measuring moving the needle on some key business impact and work our way backwards to show that we're doing that? I mean, I think in that sense, Kirkpatrick had it dead right. He, focuses too much on formal learning. But I don't care how we get there as long as we're improving the outcomes. And there's a lot we need to do to make that happen. I'm just not quite sure. It's continuing to advocate, continuing to raise the game. I talk with, colleagues of ours who are out at the forefront, people like Michael Allen or Will Thalheimer or Julie Dirksen, who are talking about the right ways to do things. And we're still frustratedly struggling trying to help communicate this message.
Well, I think also part of the problem is the academic world is not into performance. The business world is, and when those two collide, it doesn't always work very well because one is based on strictly performance. The other one is based strictly on academics and learning. And unless you can combine that into more of a performance model, it's probably going to be fairly useless. And it's going to be what we have right now, which is just a lot of blah, blah. Tons of blah, blah. And which doesn't really help the person perform any better or even be better at what they're supposed to do in their job, or maybe even look at different things they could do with their job. It just makes people go, here we go, another compliance class, another this, another that. And it's sort of interesting. I like your comment about the medical industry. They're so worried about all the other things. I think they could solve that just by having a disclaimer saying, death is a side effect of life, move on.
Well, I'd like to flip the conversation, though, and say, too, that when we do it well, it works really well. And the fortunate or unfortunate position that we find ourselves in, both in this chat and conversation on Twitter and various streams and so forth, is we tend to spend time looking at and talking about how it could change, how could it could improve, and why don't we get better at. And I'd love the conversation to shift to look at all these great examples of what's working well. Because I think that's how we change the industry. I think that's how we change people's minds in the learning and performance profession, whether it's HR focused, whether it's operations focused, etc. And that's my little drum I've been beating is, but what is working? Let's look at what already is working and make that the model.
And one of the problems with that, Dawn, is when things do work, many times they're behind the corporate firewall. Nobody knows about it because they're not allowed to talk about it.
Well, I think we can always give examples.
Sure. I mean,
Picture, if you will, ...
Mm-hmm.
There are people who are having successes, and I like the positive approach, Don, of pointing to those successes and real metrics that matter. It's systemic. It's like trying to change K-12 education, which also is broken in systemic ways, and yet it's so convoluted you can't address just one point. Here, people don't know what to measure. They know how to do training. It's hard to change. They've invested money in all these systems. They've got a thing that they think is working. It's hard to change. But one of the things that occurs to me is to start promoting an approach that says courses are your last resort. Start with social. Can we, get you out there finding self-help from among the community? Performance support is a backstop. If and when things are changing too fast, you're not going to be able to create courses, everything. I did some work a number of years ago now with an airplane manufacturer, big one. Complex software, they don't, use wind tunnels anymore to build planes. They do it all in software modeling. And the software's, they're using more and more software, and each of the software packages they're using is getting more complex. The training group just couldn't keep up, and finally they had to put everything they knew into wikis and get the community to keep it up to date. We've got to stop thinking we have to control everything and start releasing. Then anything that clearly emerges as places for performance support is our second resort. And this will change by the type of organization where there's a lot of churn, a lot of novices. It makes sense, but formal courses don't make sense for practitioners and experts. And in so many different places, experts are the ones, or practitioners are the ones we need to support and are the ones adding value to the organization. They need performance support, they need mentoring and coaching, they need social stuff, not courses. And so we need to shift where we start from and what sort of resource we bring to bear. Human performance technology is an approach, and to your point, Rick, about schools, places like Boise State have two ed tech programs, one sort of K-12, but the other one's organization focused, and they're looking at that HBT, but even that doesn't go far enough in my mind, both in engagement, the motivation part, and the social part. So really, I think it's our starting points are broken, and then just the familiar things we know how to do lead us down the same old paths.
Well, and also I think that both in K-12 and higher ed, but certainly in many organizations in the corporate or government structure, whatever you want to refer to, we think of building job descriptions as a once and done. We think of building the performance planning process as a once and done, and then we leave it alone for eons, however long. And it's true about high school education, whatever, there's a checkbox mindset, and some of that we're never going to change. But if we continue to talk about outcomes instead of what the standardized rubrics are and so forth, that's how we get around those things that are immovable forces, I think.
I think you're right, Dawn, and I think that's an important component.
For me, if I were talking with K-12, and I have several friends in that space, that's what I say. So they have to go to 12 years of high school education, K-12 or 1 through 12, depending what's true. What's the expected outcome? I know you're changing some of your course lineup, but mostly it's the same read and write and arithmetic, right? So what are the outcomes? What do we hope that students are able to do when they move on to their next step? Whether that's work, whether that's technical college, whether that's higher education, four-year college. Outcomes, that's my language.
And indeed, and the problem is they're focused on passing these knowledge tests instead of meaningful problem solving. We don't have any 21st century skills baked into the things we're assessing in K-12, and therefore people aren't learning problem solving, critical thinking, and until that is in the assessment. You're right. And similarly in organizations, got to quit thinking about measuring how much does it cost. We want to start measuring what are people able to do that they can't do now that the organization cares about. And it's competency that assesses what they know isn't going to lead to any change in behavior. If you want them to stop doing those things, you've got to give them practice of doing it the right way.
And it's an and conversation, not an either or conversation. So just because every state has metrics that a high school senior needs to have, checked all these lines, doesn't mean that we aren't also having outcome-based conversation about what they're going to do next, and that's individual.
And Clark, you brought up a really good point earlier, and that is the development cycles have shortened so much that almost no one can keep up with them. Mm-hmm. And that, if nothing else, that alone is demanding a different way of looking, like you said, like wikis or something else to get information out there, because there's no way any training department or pretty much anyone can keep up with the amount of stuff that's changing. If you look
simulations, outcomes again.
Yeah,
if you're building simulations and problem solving, it's a whole different thing than building a course full of all these intersections.
Right. And the perfect example, go to Barnes & Noble, take a look at the computer section, and nowadays it's one aisle, really small. It's about 4 to 5 times less than it used to be. People aren't writing the books like they used to in the computer area because things are changing too much. By the time your book's done, there's been 1 or maybe even 2 releases of that software, which is interesting. Nobody's really tackled that yet, as how do we adjust for learning things like that? If you look at companies like lynda.com, they're going into the playlist approach from iTunes, where you take snippets of different courses you want to learn and kind of combine them together. And that's interesting. Actually, at first I didn't like that approach. I go, yeah, I kind of do like it, because that is how most of us learn. I need to learn how to do green screening in After Effects. So I don't need to learn all of After Effects. I need to learn that part of it.
That little bit.
Yeah, that little bit. And that can make you very functional.
Sadly, it's been over 2 years since I've been in a Barnes & Noble, so that probably speaks to...
I'm no better than you are. I do everything via Amazon right now on Kindle.
Right.
I occasionally order books, but it's not like I used to.
So we're not separating out, when most of the practice we give in the courses we design is practice till they get it right, mm-hmm. which doesn't actually lead to persistent skill shift. Instead of, we need to practice till they can't get it wrong, like professional athletes. When they need that significant skill shift, and other times they just need that snippet to accomplish this goal, and that's the beginning to look at that broader spectrum of need and meeting that need in flexible and powerful ways. We are beginning to see portals of little media snippets made available as part of the learning solution available, and I think that's absolutely right. We still have a number of flaws in that. We have the information architecture wrong, so it's organized by the way the person creating it thinks about it instead of the way the consumers think about it. So we When we think about our courses, we need to think about engagement and deep practice. When we think about performance support, we got to think about accessibility as well as meeting the need at the moment. When we think about social, we need to start thinking about, making it available and creating a culture where sharing is expected and rewarded, not punished. If anything you say can and will be used against you, nobody's going to share.
That's true. Well, I used to joke about when they came up with No Child Left Behind, what it did is it left everybody behind. So at least now everybody's equally left behind. That made a lot of sense. But that's kind of a hammer approach to problems versus looking at the actual problems. How do we solve this? You have so many parameters to some of these problems. You just can't hit it with one and only one solution. So it's kind of interesting. So getting a little more into, because I know people who watch the show always like this, we're talking a little bit about the theory and some of the functionality and how we change things. Getting practical as far as development tools. Do you have any recommendations for mobile development? Tools that you like, tools that you find work? And like you said, it could be as simple as the camera on your phone, but what tools would you use to create, let's say, a mobile development or a mobile learning environment?
Mm-hmm. And I deliberately try not to track the tool space on mobile too much because it's changing so fast. Mm-hmm. My mantra is, if you get the design right, there are lots of ways to implement it. If you don't get the design right, it doesn't matter how you implement it. So I very much focus on figure out the design. Then there'll be a number of ways you can do. So let me talk slightly different level than tool. HTML5, prototype it in mobile web first. Mm-hmm. Then, if you need access to, the difficult thing is there are trade-offs. There are no right answers, only trade-offs. Mobile web, if you make it accessible via mobile web, you don't have to worry about releasing a new version of the app for the device when information changes. When people go there next, it'll be up to date. The next level is wrapped mobile web. You can actually wrap HTML5 so it resides natively on the platform and can take advantage of some of the features of the device. So it's more local. Finally, you can make a device-specific app. You can program in the native language, and that gives you full access to all the capabilities of the device. It gives you, faster performance at a trade-off. Anytime you make a change, you have to recompile and re-release. And to me, right now, for most corporate needs, if you remember a few months ago, Facebook's app on your phone or iPad suddenly increased in performance. And what happened is they finally stopped just wrapping HTML5 and then gone native. But most times you're releasing for your internal people, you don't need that extra level of polish. And so you probably can do HTML5, mobile web, or wrap HTML5. And there's a number of tools I strongly recommend. In addition to my book, as a nice complement on the development side is Chad Udell's Learning Everywhere. And it talks more about the tools like PhoneGap, which are one of these wrapping mechanisms. Because most of the tools right now, if you just want performance support like content, little quick reference checklists or little videos, something like OnPoint Digital Cellcast will get it out there. But most of these things are still about putting courses on a phone, and there are not so many tools that are about putting more generic content and portals and information access out there. Chris Rockwell, who was running hybrid learning, wrote his own delivery platforms for each device and wrote the content in Dito, which is a XML markup that allows you to separate out how it looks from what it says, and then so it can do it differently depending on the device. That's still where we're at. The tools are changing so fast, though. I'm hoping something like Zebra's apps will start putting out HTML5, and then we can start seeing really interesting simulations going on. But I still might not put that on a phone. I might put that on a tablet instead. And your existing portal tools now start having mobile capability, mobile access. So I'd almost wait until the tool you're already using for these tasks becomes mobile enabled. And so another one of my phrases for mobile is, is it mobilized? If you're talking to vendors and they don't have a mobile plan or a mobile solution, they really aren't a viable partner.
And it's not one solution for mobile, right? So you want them to think mobile, not necessarily say we use Storyline to build something in mobile, right?
For the time, you might be able to build performance support tools. Hey, iBook Author. Any authoring tool for ebooks might be a solution to get content on these devices as well. So there are lots of different ways to get it once you get the design right. That's really the point I'm trying to help people get their minds around.
And speaking of, somebody's iPad just made noise.
Yeah, I'm not sure who. I'm looking at mine going, it wasn't mine. So.
I turned on the sound off, so I just recognize that tone because it rings all day long in my house.
Well, with that, I think we are about at the end of the show. Clark, as always, it's always a stimulating, good conversation with you, and give some good pause for thought on some of the things you said today. And a pleasure having you on again.
For the good interactions and the participants in the chat for their contributions.
Yeah. Now, Clark, are you going to be at eLearn?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, if you are there, please drop by. I'm going to be working the booth with the iSpring folks as a guest, and if you have a chance, drop by and say hi, because I don't know how much I'll be able to get out of booth while I'm there, but I'd love to meet you in person and to say hello.
No worries. I will make a point of it.
That sounds great. And Dawn, I know you're not going to eLearn this year, but
no, maybe next year. You never know.
We will be thinking of you via your phone.
Okay. Got my Android. I'm ready to go.
Clark, are you going to be talking at eLearn?
Yeah, a couple sessions. I'm doing one on mobile mistakes, the way people go wrong with mobile.
That's a good
and
one.
Another one, some of the stuff I've said, the 5 phrases you need to master to get your mind around mobile, that sort of is a little bit strategy, a little bit tongue-in-cheek about breaking some of the barriers down and getting practical about mobile.
That sounds great. Well,
if you were doing that, then I asked my question earlier. That was perfect.
So if you are at eLearn, make sure you check out Clark's sessions. That's Clark Quinn. And we will see you next week on eLearnChat. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks again, Clark.
Bye-bye.
Don, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, bye-bye.